breakfast.
Good morning, homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer, and welcome to Miles Away Farm. Today we are making mulligatawny soup. And this is a recipe that I have played around with off and on for many years. I probably made this originally in my mid-20s. And mulligatawny is basically a mashup of Indian and British cooking. And it originated in India when British had control over that country. And they were used to having soup as a first course. And so that's what they wanted. And so the Indians used what they would typically use for soup and kind of adapted it. And then it's morphed many times since then. But basically it is a lightly curried soup is the short version of it. And it usually has a little bit of a sweet component, so apples or sweet potatoes. And then it often has a grain or a legume in it. So either rice or a lentil. In my particular case, I used red lentils, and that's kind of used to thicken it up. And then it often has coconut milk. So there are as many recipes for this out there as you can imagine. This particular recipe that I'm making comes from Serious Eats. They're one of my favorite sources for this kind of thing. There is actually a recipe for this in the old Joy of Cooking cookbook that I have from, I think, 1972, and I've made that recipe as well. I was intrigued by this one because it had red lentils in it instead of rice, and I'm doing a little bit less in terms of the carbs right now, and so that seemed like a good fit. Curry is another thing that is a combination of different spices, and there are many versions of that. There isn't one curry, it isn't one plant. It's usually a mix of turmeric, sometimes fenugreek, and then lots of warm baking type spices. So there's usually some cinnamon, sometimes some cardamom, some coriander. So curry can be lots of different things. I've made my own curry off and on for years as well. It's a nice way to use up random spices in your cupboard that maybe you're not using or going through quickly. So this is a homemade curry that I have made, and I think I have a recipe for this on one of my old blog posts. I'll put a link to that below if you want to try making your own curry. But again, it's really, every Indian cook has their own version of this, so there's many different kinds. And then I got into a kick where I kept running across recipes that called for Madras types of curries, and I didn't know specifically what that was, and so I bought some, and then I was somewhere else and I couldn't remember that if I'd bought some or not, and so I bought some more. And so I have multiple things of Madras curry in my cupboards as well. So I need to do a lot more curry dishes because some of these are starting to get old. So lots of curry. If you followed me for any length of time, you know that I am a big lover of curry of all kinds. And in this case, we're talking about Indian curry, not Thai curry or Vietnamese curry, and those are all dramatically different. But mulligatawny, a really lovely winter soup, and you can adapt this to your liking. The inspiration for this actually came from a Jamie Oliver YouTube video where he was doing a bunch of vegan recipes for Vegan January, and one of those was a vegan mulligatawny soup. And I really didn't want to make it vegan, but I thought to myself, gosh, I haven't made mulligatawny in 10 years. I should probably make some mulligatawny, and so we did. So really lovely winter warmer soup, and you can vary it any way you like. Mulligatawny. Let's get started.
So we're going to start out by toasting some whole spices. This is a half a teaspoon each of mustard, cumin, and coriander. And if you followed me for any length of time, you know I never toast whole spices in a skillet. I always do it in my toaster oven so that I can be multitasking and doing other things. And then into a big pot, I am sauteing some chicken thighs. So this is about a pound of chicken thighs. And these were marinated from a butcher case at one of my local grocery stores. And it was a black pepper marinade, which I thought would be fitting. Turns out these were less expensive than buying raw chicken thighs in a package, which was kind of a surprise because they were already in a deli case and had been marinated. But what the heck? Go with what's less expensive. So getting a nice browning on those. These are boneless, skinless. I am not trying to cook them all the way through. I'm just trying to get some good flavor on there. And then if you've ever noticed this mortar and pestle on my counter and wondered if I ever actually use it, occasionally I do. And so this was really easy to grind up these toasted spices, just kind of pulverized almost immediately. This is a really nice piece of equipment for when you have small amounts of things. This was too small to put into my regular spice grinder. It would have just been so light that it would have whipped around in there and not actually ground. And this is a very nice, very heavy mortar and pestle that I unfortunately don't use very often. So our chicken is finished, so we're gonna get that out of the pot and just set it aside. I had a little bit of stickage on here, mostly because there wasn't any skin on this chicken, and there's a tiny bit of texture on the bottom of this stub pot. And so there was a little bit of stickage, but that's just flavor. It wasn't a big deal. And then into this, I'm gonna put an onion, so about a cup of onion, about 3/4 of a cup of chopped carrot, and about a half a cup of celery. So classic mirepoix, but slightly different ratios. And then I'm also gonna add some chopped sweet potato and also a diced apple to this mix. And then my freshly ground spices that I've just ground there, along with a tablespoon of our curry powder. And so this is a curry powder from Penzeys, and what makes it different is mostly the fact that it has some saffron in it. And I bought it a long time ago on kind of a whim and have just not gotten around to using it. Blooming those in the oil before I add everything else. I don't show adding the apple and the sweet potato. And then in my freezer, I keep pucks of about equal parts ground fresh garlic and ginger for just this occasion, because it's perfect to be able to throw into a soup when you're in a hurry. And then about a half a cup of those red lentils, and then our chicken is going back in, and then 6 cups of chicken stock. And I used a mix here of homemade chicken stock and Better Than bouillon. So I had 4 cups of my own homemade stock and then 2 cups of Better Than bouillon. And you can see at this point the sweet potatoes and the apple are in the mix. There's the water to thin that Better Than bouillon out. Giving that a stir, bringing that to a nice simmer. And you're gonna wanna let this simmer for around an hour. I think I probably only simmered it for half hour to 45 minutes until the sweet potatoes are fork tender and the lentils that are in there are kind of falling apart, because they're gonna add to the thickness of this dish. And then I'm gonna take out the chicken and let it cool so that I can shred it. Taste this for seasoning. I have not added a lot of salt at this point, so it probably needs a bit of salt. And I have both orange and purple sweet potatoes in this from my garden, which is always fun. I also want to make sure those lentils are fully cooked. So we're going to shred up that chicken and throw it back into the pot and just make sure all the flavors are married, and we're done. So pretty quick. This is a great weeknight meal. It really does come together in probably less than a half an hour of prep time, and then probably another half an hour of cook time. And the nice thing about using chicken thighs here instead of breasts is they are a lot more forgiving in terms of drying out. And so you end up with a much more tender piece of meat with a thigh than you do with a breast. And then to serve this, it's typically served with some garnishes. I'm gonna garnish this with some fresh chopped cilantro, a little bit of Greek yogurt, and then I happen to have some homemade chili crisp on my counter. This one is more of a Mexican chili crisp than it is an Asian chili crisp. Didn't matter to me. And so we're gonna serve this up with some nice fresh coriander, a little dollop of Greek yogurt, although I think in this case this is probably just regular yogurt. I don't usually keep Greek yogurt on hand. And then a little bit of that chili oil just to add to the spiciness. And this is a pretty mild chili oil, so not real hot. But absolutely delicious, guys, and a great winter meal if you love curry. And you can vary how much curry powder you put in this. The original recipe from Joy of Cooking only called for 2 teaspoons. This one called for a tablespoon, plus all those extra spices. So make it how you like it. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.